Okay, I'm just going to say it. We're all going to die. I know it's not something many of us like to think about, let alone talk about, but it is something our guests today say we have to get a lot more comfortable talking about and planning for. Most of us have given at least some thought to what we want to happen to our bodies after we die. Maybe you want to be buried with generations of family in a cemetery. Perhaps you want to be cremated and have your ashes spread in a place that is significant to you. Today we'll hear from a Saskatchewan man who would like to see green burials become more common. I'll also speak with a member of the Saskatoon Sikh community about the cultural significance of spreading ashes in the river. And we'll talk about the importance of places such as cemeteries as spaces for people to publicly grieve and contemplate their own mortality. Our question for you today is this: what do you want to happen to your body after you die? Call 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. When Nicole White recently made a post on Facebook asking people about their thoughts on burial plots and gravestones, she was not prepared for the number of people who answered her. It turns out this question hit a chord with many people who are also navigating these questions in their own lives. So we've invited Nicole onto Blue Sky today. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, Alicia. Great to be here today.
Nice to see you. So tell us about this post you made. What got you thinking about what you want to happen to your body after you die?
Yeah, I've had some really important people in my life pass in the last few years, and I just started thinking about what do I want to do? And I think I get in a little silo, and I wanted to ask the Facebook community, and what happened was a really rich conversation that really explored some additional options people have after they pass. And I was really excited to see a meaningful social media interaction happen.
It was sure an expression of a desire to talk about it. At least that's when I looked at your post. There were like 154 comments or something. So people were engaged. People wanted to talk about it. So what were some of the questions that you put out to people on your friends list in the first place? Like what specific questions did you put out to them?
Yeah, I was having the internal conflict with the carbon footprint of cremation, but also the question about, do I need to take up space on this earth after my time is complete on it? And really, I've never been a person who visited, grave sites to go visit with people. I visit with people who's passed every day. So that physical marker wasn't really important to me, but the conversation that followed really changed my opinion on that. And really, I was excited to hear more about some of the greener options too that we're going to discuss today. And really thankful for the discussion.
What elements from the gravestone conversation got you thinking? Like what came up in that regard?
Yeah, I think some of the pieces that people were mentioning were, siblings who passed in infancy and having that physical space because they didn't have a lot of time on this earth. And then I started thinking about, our families who are impacted by MMIW, if they don't have a body to bury, what happens then? So really recognizing that space for reflection and that space to connect with a loved one is really powerful and sacred.
Someone talked about a bench, right? That was their place where they would go. Like some other ideas came up in the conversation, didn't it?
Yeah, we had a bench, we had ashes, we had a lot of folks talking about green burial, and then like a water process that I'd never heard of. So some of them aren't always available in this region, but I'm hoping that things will change and the conversation will change. And hopefully I have a long time before I actually have to worry about this. But the importance of talking to your loved ones about what you want after you pass. I think that's really important too.
Yeah. So I just want to share some of what you wrote because I like it. So you did write, I feel strange about taking space on Earth after I pass. My legacy will be the community I serve, the cool things I've done, and most importantly, the people who I love, and they love me in return. Do I require taking space after that time is complete? I'm not sure. What do you think? What are your plans? So did you find yourself going through a bit of an evolution after seeing how different people responded to those questions? Like, have your thoughts shifted at all in what you want?
Yeah, I think I'll probably be looking at a green burial and hopefully, as little chemicals attached to that. And if I can have a sheath and a tree planted on top of me, and then there's a place that my family can go if that's something they so desire. And overall, that I'd be nourishing the earth and dust to dust, fulfilling that cycle of life.
Why do you think your questions resonated so much with people?
I don't think we create a lot of intentional space to have this conversation. I think a lot of folks sort of put their heads in the sand and actively avoid it. And I think destigmatizing that conversation is something I'm happy to do whenever I can.
Yeah, but what do you think is the benefit of being more open about death, being more open about grief? Like, what are the benefits of that?
Well, and normalizing the conversation. I think, what are the benefits of that? I think there's less fear after we talk about it. I think there's less fear when you talk about what your needs are compared to others. And, having the conversation before you have to have the conversation can also be beneficial too, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting to weigh the needs of yourself and the needs of the people around you. Like, I've thought a little bit about that. If I pass before my parents, I imagine something completely different, because I don't know, I've thought about that. If something tragic like that were to happen, that I'd be requesting something different that's more for them and for my children and whatnot. Anyway, it's just something to think about, and that's what we're going to do today. So Nicole, thanks for opening this conversation and for being here today. So thank you.
My pleasure, Leisha. Thank you.
That is Nicole White. She lives in Saskatoon. We invite you to share your thoughts on this. You can give us a call today, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. We are asking you the question, what do you want to happen to your body after you die? Again, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. So to help us talk through this kind of difficult thing to talk about is Carla Combraes. She is a legacy guide and celebrant in Saskatoon. She's been listening to the conversation so far and will help us navigate these big ideas today. Carla, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Leisha. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what have you been thinking about listening to my conversation with Nicole?
I feel like I could copy and paste everything she said and repeat it, because I just agree with everything she said, that it's so important to normalize these conversations. And she said something about, the benefits about decreasing fear around mortality. I think that's such an important thing to lift up. But not only that, it's just, I think it allows us to live more fully, that the life and death are so interconnected. And when we can embrace all parts of life, the hard parts and the joyful parts, we're allowed to live much more richly in all the moments.
Mm-hmm. Do people have more options now about what can be done to their body once they die today than maybe they did a number of years ago? I'm just wondering if how much choice is there in that?
Yeah, there are increasing amounts of choices. I think what's happening right now is a little bit of a swinging of the pendulum back towards interest in, we're calling it, low ecological footprint or holistic death care. But really what it is reclaiming a way that was traditionally done 100 years ago. So, with the rise of funeral homes in the last century, professionalization of death care happened and has offered really great services, especially in modern life when it's maybe not practical for us to go and dig our own, family members' graves. But there is something also that has been lost along the way, and I think people are eager to kind of re-engage with end of life in a meaningful way, that something's been lost when we've sort of handed everything over to others. So people are looking for ways to re-engage. So when we're talking about green burial, or as Jaswant is going to speak about shortly, about going to the river to release cremated remains, there's a more physical ritual aspect to that engagement with death and dying, rather than leaving just ashes sitting in a cupboard in your closet and kind of wiping your hands of it and letting it be. So Nicole mentioned briefly aquamation, also known as water cremation or alkaline hydrolysis, which is available in Saskatchewan. This is one of only, I think, a handful of provinces and territories where it's...
So it is available
here?
It
is available here,
okay.
yeah. And Lynn will be speaking shortly about green burial. There's something called human composting, which really kind of, I know, makes people feel uncomfortable because it's such a visceral image. The euphemism for it is natural organic reduction, which is really gaining traction in the States, and it's available in over a dozen states, I believe, now. Which is really just naturally returning body to the soil without taking up land space. So lots of different things going on, for sure. Cremation is at an all-time high. We're about 80% in Canada choosing cremation. And then, of course, there's burial with embalming and casket and the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. We will hear from Jaswant and from Lynn in a bit, talking about two very different things. But I just want to put the question to you, Carla, that we're putting to everyone. What do you want to happen to your body when you die?
Yeah, when you said that at the top of the show, I thought, oh, geez. Because I do kind of, I'm like you, if this were to happen, I've got kind of different scenarios playing. One thing I can say for certain is I want something to happen, as much for my family as for me. Ideally, it'll be green. It won't involve embalming. It will be in a shroud or a simple pine casket. I also like the idea of cardboard caskets. I don't know if you've heard about it. They have been available over the years at Costco, of all places. But you can order a cardboard casket. They're rigid cardboard. And then you can incorporate a really nice ritual element into it where, kids get involved decorating the casket, or you Mod Podge pictures on it that are meaningful or whatever. So, yeah, it's a more direct return to earth. But still can be with reverence and dignity.
I haven't really given this any thought, to be honest. So I don't have an answer to that question, what I want done to my body. But I do think about the celebration. And I think my comment earlier actually comes from a roommate that I had years ago. And she had said, well, if I die young and my parents are the ones having to do the celebration, it's going to be a Catholic. It's going to be at a Catholic church. She wasn't really following that faith anymore, but she's like, this isn't for me, this is for them. And that was a comment that always stuck with me. So I think I've always kind of contemplated, gosh, what would I want? And it would depend on the circumstances and when it happened and all of that. So I think this is a good time to say hello to Jaswant Singh, who's sitting right next to you, Carla, in our Saskatoon studio. Interesting how you mentioned cremation and the numbers, Carla. So cremation, definitely a common practice for people here in Canada, but all over the world. But what happens to those ashes is often informed by culture and religion. Over the last few years, members of the Sikh and Hindu communities in Saskatoon have been working to have a designated place to spread their ashes along the river in Saskatoon. And so Jaswant Singh is a former board member of the Sikh Society of Saskatchewan. He's sitting right across from me in our Saskatoon studio. Jaswant, welcome.
Thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. I always listen to Blue Sky when I'm driving home.
Oh, I love hearing that, Jaswant.
This is a program that I connect with, and I like the diversity of different topics that we bring in this program.
Yeah, and here you are today to dive into something pretty deep. So, and I did speak to you a few years ago when this conversation was first happening about getting a designated space to do this. What's the current status now?
Yeah, we are so grateful, thankful to our city. City was able to provide us a space. We have to go through the bylaws, create particular laws for doing this, but now we have a specific spot on along the Spadina on Mewassan Park.
In the north end.
In the north end, just north of the Circle Bridge. And that's the spot. It's a kind of a isolated spot on the end of the river that we can walk with a small urn of ashes, and then we can immerse them and follow our rituals. So this is in Sikhism, Hinduism, all religions and faiths that come from Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, from Indian subcontinent. People for a long time believed that our body is made by 5 elements, and then there's a soul inside that body. And after the death, the soul leaves the body or the house in which it was living, and then we kind of disconnect the body from the person at that stage in our thought process. Mm-hmm. So we continue to celebrate the soul after the death, but the body part that we traditionally in India and Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, we all cremate that body in fire, because fire is one of the elements of how we perceive body is made up of. The five elements we go by: earth, water, air, fire, and sky. Sky is kind of unknown things that we don't know. So those are the five elements. And so we, by burning the remaining body, our thought is we are just returning it back to the primal elements where it came from. And then in India, normally it's done with fire, with the wood. So we have a wood pyre and then place the body on top. But there's no particular way for us to, whether it can be gas-lit kind of crematorium that we have in Saskatoon. So after the body is changed from organic matter into inorganic matter, we need to place that inorganic matter somewhere, either in the air or one of those elements. One of those elements is water. In India, we perceive Ganges is our very holy river, Satluj for Sikhs. So we take the ashes to one of those rivers and we immerse them there. That's for us to describe that the body has left this earth. The soul is still there. So the grieving process for us takes 7 to 13 days, depending upon Hindus. Grieve for 13 days, Sikhs grieve for 7 days. And then we have a closing kind of ceremony at the end where we say the grieving period is over and now everybody is kind of celebrating that person after that time. And then every year we kind of connect with the spirit or the soul. So it's for us, the death is sort of continuing process. It's not a that the body is burnt or buried or gone, that the person is gone. So because we kind of disconnect the soul from the body at that stage.
And then would people return to that spot on the river a year later? Like, does that become like a ritual that continues?
No, I think in Sikhism, Hinduism, we don't have a memorial place for the body. Because again, we place more importance on the soul.
I see.
Rather than on the body. And once the ashes are gone, we just consider it's gone. So there's no memorial place for us physically to connect with that person.
But it was so important for you and for other communities to have that designated spot on the river. Like, why was that so important to have that?
Because it all precipitated during the COVID time. Normally, people would take the little bit of ashes back to India and immerse in the water there, or they could go somewhere else. But during COVID, we couldn't really do that. So it became really, really important for us to connect. And the other aspect is when I came to Saskatoon in 1993, there were 200 families from whole of India. And now we have more than 10,000 people. Families living in Saskatoon. So the community has grown to a stage where we have second generation, third generation people living here. So for my son, he was born here. The home is Saskatoon.
Right.
So normally we take the ashes to the home back.
And home is here.
Home is here. It's interesting. My dad lives with us. My mom passed away 2 years back, and then he is now living with me here in Saskatoon. He's 90-year-old. And one day he said, Jaswant, I wrote my will. I want you to read. I said, I don't want to read. He said, no, I want you to let you know that I want my ashes to be not taken back to India.
Oh, wow.
This is the place where my body will leave the world, and I want my ashes to go here in the river somewhere. And I was so happy that the city was so accommodating to have that place for us. It really connects us with the with the city, and in a way, immigrants feel that sort of connection that Saskatoon is so welcoming to us.
Yeah. Oh, Jaswant, I'm so glad we could have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing that bit with us.
Thank you very much.
That is Jaswant Singh. He is a former board member of the Sikh Society of Saskatchewan. Today really is an opportunity to learn what people are doing and thinking about when it comes to death, what they want done to their body when they die. With us for the remainder of the show is Carla Combre. She's a legacy guide and celebrant. She's been listening to all these conversations. And we have someone who's very connected to green burials coming up in a moment. Join the conversation today. We are talking about what you want done to your body when you die. 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. We do have someone on the line, but Carla, I just want to ask you what you're thinking about after hearing from Jaswant and the importance of having that space here in Saskatoon. You must come across that a lot, where people have really strong wishes, a real strong connection either to a place or a community, and they really want to see that fulfilled.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm very happy that their community and others who want that as an option to release cremated remains into the river, that's a possibility. I was really struck by that story that he shared at the end about his dad. Mm-hmm. And just the ability to maintain certain age, time immemorial traditions and rituals, but then to kind of have them evolve also with this shifting sense of place and of home. It also made me think about people who are not affiliated with a specific faith tradition. And I think, there is some comfort for people who know what to do specifically. Like it's prescribed. This is what you do when someone dies.
Like my grandma knew.
Yes.
My grandma knew.
Exactly.
What was
and when you
happen.
don't have that, sometimes people just think, well, I'll do nothing then, because they don't even know where to begin. But that it is possible for people to find really meaningful ways that sometimes take inspiration from other traditions and tweaking it and making it your own. But yeah, I was really, really touched by what he shared.
Well, there's more interesting things to come, Carla. We actually have a caller on the line. So Ingrid in Regina joins us right now. Hi there, Ingrid.
Hi. Yes, I've been thinking about this a lot for quite a few years because I have no family here. And about 15 years ago, I had a scare with my health. And so I know I don't want to do the traditional burial. I knew always that I wanted a green burial. But when I was doing my research, I found out that in Regina that's impossible at the moment. I'm hoping that the city of Regina, the councillors will change things so that we will have that option in Regina. Perhaps part of one of the cemeteries now could be dedicated to green burial. Edmonton has the most beautiful green burial site. It's called Aurora Gardens in Northern Lights Cemetery. They have others too in the city, but that's the big one. And it has about 7 locations just in that Aurora Gardens. And so what it is people can be buried, and there are all kinds of bushes and flowers and trees and pathways, and so it's a park, and so you're feeding life forms that are still present, and I like that idea. I was thinking about while I was waiting to speak. Joni Mitchell's song "We Are Stardust," and I know a lot of songs have sort of included that. Earth is just this tiny part of the universe, and so I didn't grow up here. I have no family here, but I decided I didn't have to be buried back in Australia, which is where I grew up. It also is not environmentally friendly, and I have a degree in environmental sciences, so I want it to be environmentally sound. And the problem for cremation for me is you end up putting 190 kilograms per person of carbon into the atmosphere because you need so much fuel. This is pretty direct, pretty ugly thought, but for the fuel to burn bone down to ashes, it's a huge amount of energy, and so that's how much is put into the atmosphere. And then in the cemeteries in Regina, we've got bylaws that say you have to have either a fiberglass dome. Well, fiberglass comes from oil and it's toxic. And, we're going back into the earth again, but why put all this toxic stuff back into the earth? Or it has to be concrete. So And part of it is because it's easier then for them to maintain it. But if it was a park, all you'd be maintaining would be taking weeds out between plants, and you wouldn't have to be using a mower and pouring, again, more carbon into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I found out that towns around Regina, they don't have those rules, so that it's also way less expensive in small towns in Saskatchewan. So I bought a grave for $650 in a small town close to Regina. But in Regina, the cheapest one you can get is like $2,800.
Wow.
Right. So
Yeah.
anyway, so there's lots of changes I think that we could have.
Yeah. Well, you just set up.
In
You set up our next conversation so perfectly, Ingrid. I know you're not alone in contemplating these things, and so I hope you can keep listening, because the next person we're going to speak to knows a lot about this, and I think you'll really enjoy that conversation. So, Ingrid, thank you.
Thank you.
That's Ingrid joining us in Regina. You can call us too, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. We're asking what you want done to your body when you die. And many people do feel strongly about wanting a green burial. Our next guest went to some pretty extraordinary measures to make sure that happens. Former U of S Professor Lynn Oliphant has set up a green burial cemetery on his land just outside of Saskatoon. He's also the Saskatchewan director of the Green Burial Society of Canada. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alicia.
So Ingrid called and shared, what's on her mind, what she wants, and she's very concerned about the environmental impact of a regular burial. I just want you to take a moment to respond to Ingrid before we get into all of the knowledge that you have in this area. But when you listen to Ingrid, how do you want to respond to that?
Well, I completely agree with her. We're all interconnected with nature, and as David Suzuki has said, nature do to ourselves and vice versa. And death is a natural part of existence. And it's just as critical to consider the environmental impacts of life, which we are coming to grips with now with climate change, etc. It's also important to consider the environmental impacts on our death. And we use an awful lot of materials and energy in many of our funeral practices today that are, I would consider, not exactly green.
So what did you do? I want to know about what you set up on your land just outside of Saskatoon.
Well, we just applied to have a cemetery, and then we could set the rules for the cemetery. It was a bit of a difficult process at the time, and luckily my MLA cut through some of the red tape, even though I had run against her in the previous election. And we finally got certification for the cemetery, and we eliminated all costs for the plot and no expectation of perpetual maintenance of the site. It's just going to be maintained as a natural site, and we just made it available with the stipulations that there's no embalming, no elaborate casket materials, either just a simple shroud or a casket of biodegradable materials, and the only costs then in terms of the cemetery interment would be the digging of the grave, which people could do by hand if they wish, and filling it back in. And then we restricted any monuments to ones that were fairly simple and ground level so that we can continue to cut the hay crop and graze animals on that property.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, Lynn, if you can help me understand why this isn't more common, what the red tape is, what the intention was behind embalming in the first place. Like, I'm just trying to think of what concerns or just, and I mean, you've been through the process, so what is the other side of this? Like, why would there be reluctance to move towards a more green burial?
Well, if you would have talked to anyone a few hundred years ago, it was all green burials, right? When people died, at most they were either buried or burned in a funeral pyre, and that was it. There were no expensive caskets, etc. The embalming, I believe, initiated during the Civil War in the States, when people were being killed on the battlefield. They had a hard time transporting the bodies back home, and embalming became the way they did that. They infused these chemicals that cross-link the proteins of the body. These are the same chemicals that we use, Jaswant and I use when we are studying pieces of animal tissue that we want to preserve and be able to observe under the microscope.
Yeah, you work together with Jaswant in a completely different, not in a death capacity, in a completely different capacity. Hey.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, he took over my job when I left it, which was great.
What a small world.
So, yeah.
So how many
standpoint?
I just want to ask you how many.
Ahead,
how many? Because the connection with you isn't super great, Lynn. You are breaking up a bit, but we'll keep going. I'm getting what you're saying, but I want to ask you how many plots you have, and I think it was like first come first serve is how you're operating it.
We are. We got initially we got 12 plots, and of those 12 plots, right now 8 have been used. So we got 4 plots left. 2, my wife Rhonda and I are saving for ourselves, and the other 2 are open. We do it on a first come first served basis. You essentially have to die in order to access a plot, but we've made it open to anyone that wants to use this site. We've had some wonderful things happen as part of that, because we don't charge for the plot. One family that they give us some money towards the cemetery, and I tried to talk them out of it, and to no avail, and got a check. And the next burial was a family that was not well off at all, and a young woman with 2 children, and we were able to use that money to pay for the cost of digging and filling in the grave, and put those 2 families in contact with one another, and it was, just a very satisfactory end for both of those families in terms of an end of life option.
Why is this so important to you, Lynn? Like you went as far as creating this burial ground on your property to ensure that you and your spouse would get that. Like that speaks to the commitment you have to this.
Yes, but I mean, like I say, if we looked 100 years ago, any farm family, when somebody died, they buried them. It was easy. Now we've got lots of restrictions, and I understand the restrictions. I mean, ideally, all animals, when they die in a given place. They may have been eaten by a predator, but they will certainly be scavenged by other vertebrates, and any remains are decomposed by microorganisms and small organisms of the soil and returned. It's amazing that we've had life on this planet for billions of years, yet when you walk through the forest, you don't get the sense that there's dead bodies everywhere. In fact, it's rare that you even come across a dead body. The natural system is set up with decomposers that take care of that in a matter, very often, even with a large animal, in a matter of a few days. And the important thing is, we build up in our bodies essential chemical elements that are necessary for life. And when we put a dead body, a human body, in a sealed casket that may be a hardwood casket, it may be a metal casket. Very often it's entombed in a crypt or vault of cement. we're preventing those elements from going back into the cycle of life. It's like we're scavenging the whole surface of the earth for these essential elements like calcium and phosphorus and nitrogen, and putting them away in a way that they can never be used again by life on the planet. It's bordering obscene.
Lynn, you've given me so much to think about. Before we say goodbye to you, I think you and Carla might know each other. You're both very much in the death space.
We do. Hello, Carla.
Hi, Lynn. It's nice to see you again.
Carla, I just want to give you guys the opportunity to talk a bit to each other because I do find it interesting that you do know of each other. I don't know how well you know each other, but you're definitely aware of the work that each of you are doing in this space. So, Carla, what do you think about what Lynn has shared today?
I mean, again, I could copy and paste what he said, and I agree with all of it. I think when you really think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. The way what has become known as traditional or mainstream is not actually traditional. It's not what has sustained life on Earth for millennia. And I think Lynn is part of a generation that is really pioneering a shift in death care. He's definitely ahead of the curve. I mean, way ahead of the curve. And Saskatchewan as a province is behind the curve. I think a lot of municipalities and regions are way ahead of where we are here. But it's starting on. I think it's kind of like when you want to buy a white car, suddenly you see white cars everywhere. I think for people for whom this conversation is new, you're going to start noticing things like death cafes and terms like death positive movement, green burial, human composting, death doulas, they're out there. There's a huge rising community of people who are leading the way in reclaiming some of this.
Well, I even wanted to share because it's fairly new to me. But then I learned that Woodlawn Cemetery in Saskatoon accepts remains that are not embalmed. They may be wrapped in a shroud rather than encased in a casket, but a fiberglass dome must be placed over the body in the grave to keep the soil from settling. So nowhere near what's happening with Lynn's cemetery, but at the same time, it's there's no embalming necessary for some plots. So I learned that just because of this show today. We've got some callers and I've got some emails. So Lynn, maybe don't go anywhere just in case people have questions that I can't answer. So I might call on you to help answer some of this, but let's go through a few of these here. I'll start with some emails. So Pat writes, my family has several plots in our small town cemetery. I would like to have a green burial, but not sure how to approach the board of volunteers that run this cemetery. Do you have any information, ideas on how someone would pursue this option? Okay, Lynn, I need you. Or maybe Carla, So actually, because Carla, you're dealing with people all the time who are at end of life. So if someone wants to pursue this as an option, they want a green burial, they have several the family has plots in a small town cemetery. How would they pursue this option? Carla, do you want to take that first?
I can try to take a stab at it and then feel free to chime in, Lynn. But I think what's mostly available here is sort of green light. You can be buried with and Lynn was saying in this small town, I'm not totally familiar with the small town restrictions, whether a vault is still necessary or a fiberglass dome. But certainly in the city here, there are funeral service providers like Saskatoon Funeral Home who work a lot with families, specifically from certain faith traditions, Jewish, Muslim, who traditionally will be buried in a simple shroud within 3 days and it's direct burial. So, avoiding the fancy caskets and the embalming and stuff. So in that sense, it's green, but the restrictions at the cemeteries are such that it needs to be maintained. There are fertilizers going into the ground and chemicals and lawn being mowed and all that. So I don't know that even in a small town, the pure sort of 100% just return to earth, no grave marker, that type of thing would be permitted. Worth looking into for sure.
Lynn, what would you say? Someone wants to pursue this?
I think you just have to ask and say, I want a green burial. And most places should be able to give you reasonable options. I know one option is to join the Funeral and Mortuary Society of Saskatchewan, which has contacts with a number of funeral homes that that are very good at giving people whatever alternative they want at the end of life. And we've been working, it's certainly easier to work with some funeral homes than others. And, the funeral business is a big business in Canada. It's approaching $2 billion a year. And much of that money is unfortunately spent on these unsustainable end-of-life options of metal caskets and cement burials, etc., and plots that are maintained in perpetuity, theoretically, by having your lawn mowed.
Thanks, Lynn. So we got a caller on the line. Let's go to Colleen in Saskatoon. Hi, Colleen.
Oh, hello, Alicia and Blue Sky and guests. Local poet. I have written a little poem about this topic.
Oh, I love it.
It's called Stone. That's the title of the poem. Stone. I will be stone in the far-off future. Calcium collects itself not so neatly inside my heart. Eventually, I will be stone. Don't worry. My cardiologist intimated that I had decades. Exactly the word you want to hear from a cardiologist. Dust and ash remains will be released into a northern river system to be free in this ecosystem of the universe. Will I make it to the ocean, or will I be a pillow for fish bellies? Either way, I will have fulfilled my Earthwalk's purpose. My spirit will continue in the next plane of existence. My dust, ash, and water composite could eventually end up in Iceland and be part of the volcanic activity there. I could delay transatlantic flight travel like my favorite volcano once did. You remember her, don't you? Ayafayala Yoko? My lava dreams will be realized. The floor is Colleen.
Colleen, you just made my day. Thanks for calling. That was great. Totally appreciate it. Thanks, Colleen.
Humor, just humor and acceptance of death. Yes.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Colleen. Dale is on the line in Saskatoon. Hey, Dale.
Hi, Lisa.
What are your thoughts?
Hello?
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I saw a TED Talk 12 years ago about the body returning to natural substances, and the problem with Ingrid talked about the problem with cremation, that all the toxins and energy go into the atmosphere, etc. But the TED Talk was about a body bag that had mussels and other sea creatures that would consume your body and break down the plastics and the heavy metals. So I thought, it seems to me that would be the best way to return our body to nature. Lynn was talking about, just a natural, just a shroud and the body and the microorganisms breaking it down. Would the microorganisms break down the heavy toxins in our body, though, the plastics, the mercury, the heavy metals? Lynn,
that's a question for you.
You cannot break down heavy metals. You can concentrate them, you can disperse them, but these are elements and they stay elements. On the other hand, plastics made out of petroleum products, there are some microorganisms that are capable of breaking those down, but because plastics are new to the planet, they're not very common and not widely distributed right now. So plastics become a problem in that they don't biodegrade well. If we keep on putting the plastics into the environment, that these microorganisms will evolve to the point where they can utilize the plastic to provide themselves with energy and materials. But it's not the case right now.
Dale, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Will the biodegrading of the body in your system, will some of the toxins get into the water table?
We don't use I mean, the toxins that you have to worry about are the toxins used in the embalming fluid, like formalin. And these
our body has a lot of toxins. We all have plastic in our body, microplastics. So I mean, and we have all those.
Go ahead, Lynn. Yeah.
Those are present in small amounts, certainly, and we're finding out more and more about that. But that's our problem. If we don't put the plastics out there, they won't be in our body. A normal animal body pre the Industrial Revolution and all of these novel chemicals that we put out there was no problem. Everything got recycled.
So it's so interesting. Lynn, thanks for that answer. And Dale, thanks for calling. I want to get through a couple emails here before we end the show today. So Judy writes, my husband and I are going to be cremated and buried together on a plot at a burial site called Treeternity Memorial Forest near Vanscoy, about 20 minutes from Saskatoon. A memorial tree is planted on the plot either before or after death, along with an engraved plaque, which is placed on the ground at the base of the tree. The tree planting can happen in a small ceremony, or it can be planted by the owner of the Treeternity site. At the present time, plots are $1,200. When the site is filled, it will be a beautiful forest, which can be turned over to the Sask Wildlife Federation, so the land will never be sold. The site is definitely worth checking out online for more details. Carla, I'm assuming you've been there?
I haven't actually been, but I've worked with someone who has pre-planned her memorial, and her plan is to have a tree. She's, we've explored her story and what her values and beliefs and all of that kind of thing, what kind of legacy she wants to leave behind. And so she was very intentional about the type of tree she chose, and we've woven into the ceremony, how that tree reflects who she has tried to live as throughout her life. And
beautiful.
Yeah. So it's definitely an option. It's like a best kept secret, I think.
Yeah. So email from Keith, who says, I love the idea of green burials and plan to use it myself after any useful organs have been harvested. There should be an environmental surcharge for embalming and cremation. Another option is donating your body to science. Great show. Well, great email, Keith. Thank you. And Randy writes, I'm donating my body to the U of S School of Medicine, as my mother and father did. My doctor told me cadavers are appreciated and necessary for their education. What a show. This has been so interesting. I don't know if I, came into work thinking, it's going to be a great show about death. But wow, I've just been blown away.
I can't believe it's already almost 1 o'clock.
I know, we're done.
So much more to say.
Carla, thank you so much for being one of our guests today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And Lynn, thanks so much for sharing your information with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Lynn Oliphant is the Saskatchewan Director of the Green Burial Society of Canada. You heard from Carla Combraes today. She's a legacy guide and celebrant. For more information on Carla and what she does, you can go to carlacombraes.com.